There is a feeling out there, many executives and investors into China have, I suppose, promise fatigue. And there's got to be a point, an inflection point.
No, I think there's justifiable promise fatigue, and I think that's really what's exercised the Trump administration. People have been wondering for about a year now whether Donald Trump is serious about trade and serious about the trade deficit with China in particular. 2017 passed without anything major happening, but if you look at the latest announcement he made of potential tariffs on another $100 billion in goods, that's really an exclamation point on a series of escalating steps that the administration has taken since the beginning of this year.
Has the narrative changed in China itself? Does it no longer look at itself as being the David against the Goliath and sees themselves as a Goliath, given the noises he made about Cold War mentalities and things like that?
Well, I think we're clearly entering the third era of Chinese history. If Mao secured China's political independence and Deng ushered in a period of economic prosperity, Xi Jinping sees himself as the man who will preside over China, taking its rightful place in the world. And so I think there is a lot of confidence and even swagger that comes with that.
Does Washington at the moment have a China strategy in your view?
I think the administration has a series of objectives and impulses, but I'm not sure it's knit together in the most effective way. The administration actually has a point on the economics. China, in any number of ways, does abuse the world trading system. But I think where the administration has badly fumbled the issue is in the politics. And they haven't been successfully able to build a coalition to support its positions on trade.
This is just it, isn't it? Because what we have is, sorry about the noise, we're in a position at the moment where we have these tariffs that could go tit for tat for a long time. What you're suggesting is that perhaps there are legitimate concerns, but this is the wrong way of going about it. So what would be the right way?
Look, I think what the administration could do is be seen as upholding the World Trade Organization and the international trading system as opposed to being seen as undermining it. It could be seen as working in concert with allies as opposed to hitting them with steel tariffs as it did earlier this year. And most importantly, it needs to have a positive economic agenda for the region. That was the Trans-Pacific Partnership. But as you know, Rish, the first step Donald Trump took, was to pull out of TPP.
But there have been some mutterings that he might try and do something to reawake that, and with America's influence, or America's position in that also. But I had a guest on the other day saying this is not about China. Unlike Japan in the 80s, this is not about China. This is really about Asia.
Right.
Is that the way you see it as well?
Well, I think it's a specific concern on trade, and the trade deficit in particular, which, as you know, the president is very focused on. And you're absolutely right. It's not just focused on China. He's complained about Korea and the Korea-U.S. Free Trade Agreement. They've accepted a renegotiation of that. And he's asking for a bilateral free trade agreement with Japan. So there are any number of Asian partners who are in the crosshairs on trade.
Siddharth, where does this actually leave the geopolitical dynamic? Because on the one hand, we've got the Europeans and the Japanese saying, yeah, sure, we'll support Washington at the WTO. Right. And then we see this closer and closer set of ties between Moscow and Beijing. Are we entering into Cold War Mark I?
I don't think it's a new Cold War, but I think the overall geopolitical dynamic is that we're in a period of great uncertainty about America's objectives and America's role in Asia, and we're seeing great confidence and ascendancy on the part of China. And every country in the region is trying to make calculations around those two forces.
This also will be, North Korea will figure into all this naturally. And that brings us on to the other leg of foreign policy in this upcoming meeting at some stage, early June, and as what has been touted, between Donald Trump and Kim. Now, tell us about that and what your view is.
There are two basic questions that the administration needs to answer. One is, what does denuclearization mean? And the danger right now is that there's a different definition of denuclearization operating in Pyongyang, Beijing, Seoul, Tokyo, and Washington. And so the administration needs to figure out what its objectives are. And then crucially, it needs to decide what it's willing to give up to achieve denuclearization as it defines it.
Is there only downside for Donald Trump meeting the North Korean leader, and is there only upside for Pyongyang?
Rish, there are two risks, in my view, of the Trump-Kim meeting. One is that the talks fail, and the other is that the talks succeed. What I mean by that is that it is possible that Trump will want a deal so badly that he's willing to basically give up a lot in terms of the U.S. military presence in Asia for a little in terms of vague promises of denuclearization. And then the flip side, I think, is clear. If the talks fail, we could set ourselves on a path to conflict, which would be terrifying indeed.